The heat always felt too heavy in their little village. It wasn't just the sun, it was the weight of the air, thick with dust and need. Maya knew the smell of poverty. It smelled like dry earth and the tired sweat of people working too hard. She was born into this, and she carried the knowledge like a second, heavier skin. Her father was a strong man, but years of hauling things and fixing broken walls had bent his back. He took any job, no matter how small or dirty, earning just enough to keep a fragile ceiling over their heads. Her mother, whose hands were permanently rough from the soil, spent her days under a small, tattered canopy by the main road. She sold onions, potatoes, whatever she could manage, watching the few coins trickle in. Maya's older brother Leo felt the strain most acutely. He was clever and eager, but without connections, he was stuck. He watched his youth fade while looking for work that never came. Their struggle was constant, a slow, grinding ache. The worst time had scarred Maya's memory forever. A bad harvest, a debt unpaid, and they had been forced out of their tiny rental home. They slept rough for weeks, huddling together against the cold night air. The memory wasn't a sad story. It was a promise to herself that she would never let Themba that unprotected again. In the midst of all this emptiness, their parents held one thing sacred: education. It was their only weapon against the world. They went without food, without new shoes, just to make sure Maya and Leo had books and could attend class. They spoke of the school as a palace, a place where futures were forged, not simply endured. Maya absorbed this lesson completely. She didn't just study, she fought her way through the textbooks. She saw the lines of worry on her mother's face and the exhaustion in her father's eyes, and she turned that pain into focus. It paid off when she was awarded the only full university scholarship in their region. The news was not met with shouts of joy, but with a quiet, powerful release of tension. Her mother simply sat down and cried, the tears washing streaks in the dust on her cheeks. Maya was now the family's future, their clear shot at escape. The scholarship was a victory, but she knew the fight was far from over. It simply meant she had exchanged the tools of manual labor for the tools of the mind. The pressure to succeed was immense, but she accepted it. It was the price of their survival. University was like landing on another planet. Everything moved faster, smelled cleaner, and looked easier. Maya felt the constant low-level thrum of being an outsider. Her scholarship paid for tuition, but everything else was a challenge. She lived in the cheapest dorm, wore the same few worn outfits, and always felt hungry. She worked constantly to make up the financial gap. Late at night, she cleaned the library floors. On weekends, she tutored bored, wealthy children who didn't appreciate the privilege of their books. Every coin earned was counted twice, then tucked into an envelope. She sent the envelope home, a monthly ritual of love and duty. After 4 years, she walked across the stage, the heavy diploma in her hands, feeling like a badge of honor. She had done it. Now came the hard part, making the degree work. The job search was brutal. Employers saw the small village address, the lack of family backing, and passed her over. It was a vicious cycle. She needed a good job to escape poverty, but her poverty made it impossible to get a good job. Her breakthrough came at a large city supermarket. She got a job as a cashier. It wasn't glamorous. It meant long hours on her feet, the endless beep of the scanner, and forced politeness toward rude customers. But it was a real salary. It was consistent. With her first full paycheck, she went straight home. She pressed the money into her mother's hand. "No more standing in the worst heat, Mama," Maya said, trying to keep her voice steady. "This pays for the month. Rest." The family didn't suddenly become rich, but the money provided a small foundation. Her father took easier work, and her mother could stay home more often. Leo finally had the freedom to look for a real apprenticeship instead of just accepting grueling day labor. Maya moved into a cramped room above a busy bus station in the city. She was exhausted every night, but she was paying the bills. She felt a deep, quiet pride. She had kept her promise. The stability gave her a moment to breathe, a moment to look up from the battlefield of her life and think of herself. She was 23. She started to allow herself a small secret dream, finding a kind man who would see her hard work, not her empty bank account. She wanted to build a simple, clean life, a place where the fear of tomorrow didn't live. She wanted love, not rescue. The time had finally come, she thought, to claim a little happiness for herself. Maya was attractive and carried herself with an air of quiet determination that drew attention. In her crisp cashier uniform, she looked competent and self-assured. Men noticed her. Customers would sometimes wait until her line was empty to try to talk to her. She went on a few dates. They were simple, hopeful outings, a walk, a cheap dinner. She didn't expect much, just a man who was decent and kind. The initial thrill was always intoxicating, a brief promise of a normal life. But the good feeling never lasted past the inevitable conversation about their backgrounds. "So what does your family do?" they would ask, casual and curious. Maya never lied. The truth was too big to hide. She would explain, clearly and honestly, that her parents lived in the village. She would talk about the hard work, the reliance on her income, the years of struggle. She would avoid the word homeless, but the reality of their deep inherited poverty was impossible to miss. The reaction was always the same, and it was devastatingly consistent. It wasn't loud, it wasn't insulting, it was a subtle, instant withdrawal. A tiny, almost imperceptible closing off of the eyes. The warmth would drain out of their face, replaced by a calculating coolness. The follow-up dates never happened. The text messages stopped. She would receive an awkward, brief note about how busy they were, or sometimes just silence. She understood. They weren't looking for a partner, they were looking for security. She was not security, she was responsibility. Her love came with the massive, unpaid debt of her family's life. She was a woman who needed rescuing, and these young men weren't looking to be heroes. They were looking for ease. Each rejection felt like a fresh, hot brand of shame. It made her feel dirty, unworthy of simple happiness. Her achievements, the scholarship, the degree, the job were erased the moment her background was revealed. She realized that poverty was not just a lack of money, it was a visible stamp of social failure that marked her as unmarriageable. She started to feel a bitter, cold resentment. She stopped meeting men's eyes. Love was a privilege, she concluded, one she had to earn with enough money to buy her whole family out of the social debt. She hadn't earned that yet. She was still paying, and the price included her own emotional life. The city's cold shoulder was a heavy weight, pushing her small dreams further and further away. The rejections didn't just hurt Maya, they were an echo of the pain her brother Leo felt daily. Leo was good-hearted and quiet, but his attempts to build a life were constantly frustrated. He still lived near the village, his job search slow and difficult. Leo was a skilled craftsman, his hands clever and strong, but employers wouldn't trust a man without formal papers or wealthy sponsors. He struggled to even get an interview, his potential overshadowed by his lack of pedigree. He suffered the same blows in love. He was kind and earnest, but when the women he dated learned about the family's situation, they vanished. Their own families needed them to marry a man who could add stability, not one who needed it desperately. One rainy evening, Leo called Maya. His voice was tired and hollow. "It happened again, Maya," he said. "She was so kind. We talked for weeks. Then she met my mother. Just saw her by the stall wearing her old coat. She called me later and said she was sorry. Said she couldn't afford to love me." Maya felt a raw, protective fury. "That's not love, Leo. That's a transaction. You deserve better." "But that's what the world is, isn't it?" He countered, his voice heavy. "We are collateral damage. We were born into a responsibility that nobody else wants to share. They look at us and see a hole in the ground that their money would fall into. Their shared pain solidified their bond. They were in the same trap, victims of the same cruel social math. They often talked about saving every possible penny to buy a small piece of land somewhere remote, where they could finally be judged only by their character. Leo finally managed to visit Maya in the city. He looked thin. He brought her a small, roughly carved wooden key, a symbol of the home they would one day build. "I can't take it anymore, AGI," he admitted, resting his head against the thin wall of her tiny room. "I'm fighting too hard just to be treated like a normal man. I feel like I'm running out of time." The sight of his exhaustion broke Maya's heart more than her own loneliness ever could. It was clear that their poverty was not just affecting their present, it was stealing their futures. She felt the fierce urgency to end the struggle, to stop the social machine that was grinding her family down. She needed a breakthrough, something drastic, before the silent shame and endless struggle destroyed them all. One evening, a week after Leo's discouraging visit, Maya's mother called. Her voice was trembling, but this time it wasn't fear. It was a strange, dizzying disbelief. "A messenger came, Maya, from the city," her mother whispered, sounding awed. "He brought a letter and so many things." The news poured out. A wealthy older gentleman named Mr. Vance had proposed marriage to Maya. He was said to be in his late 60s, a retired businessman, and a widower. The accompanying gifts were not romantic, but practical, designed to hit them where they were weakest. Heavy sacks of the best rice, several large tins of cooking oil, flour, and expensive soft blankets. It was a clear, calculated promise of security. It was the stuff of survival. Maya felt cold. Her dreams were of a partner, a contemporary. This was a benefactor, a patron. It felt like selling a life, not starting one. "Why me? How did he find us?" Maya asked, her voice tight. Her parents had no answers, only the words from the elegant letter, which praised Maya's devotion to her family and her academic success. Mr. Vance promised to take care of her and her entire family. He promised a monthly allowance and, more importantly to Leo, a guaranteed trade, apprenticeship in the city. Her parents were already convinced. The fear of hunger was a powerful persuader. "He is old, Maya," her father said, his voice unusually gentle, "but he is offering a sanctuary. The good men your age, they ran from us. This man is running to us. What choice do we have?" Maya promised to come home. She couldn't fight the logic. The social barrier that had kept her unmarried was now, ironically, opening a door. An older, established man didn't care about their poverty. He was simply offering a formal exchange. She was their only leverage, and she had to use it. As she looked around her cramped, noisy room, the shame of her rejections morphed into a grim, hard resolution. If this was the only way to save them, she would walk the path. Maya traveled home, the marriage proposal hanging over her like a dark cloud. She tried to convince herself that a life of respect and security with a kind, older man was a good deal, a trade well made. When she arrived, she saw the relief the promise of money had brought her parents, but she also saw something worse. Her father looked frail, not just tired. He moved slowly, his face etched with a deeper pain than just old age or hard work. She took him aside in the small, dusty yard. "Papa, tell me the truth about this marriage. Is this your idea? Are you well?" Her father looked away, shame and fear mixing in his aged eyes. He finally pulled out a worn manila envelope from a loose brick in the wall. Inside were official hospital forms. Maya opened them with shaking hands and read the clinical language slowly. Her father was gravely ill. He had a life-threatening condition that required complex, expensive surgery immediately. "I've known for 4 months," he confessed, his voice thick with tears. "But how could I tell you? We have no savings. Your salary, Leo's few pennies, it would only pay for the first tests. We would watch the money run out and still watch me die." He then explained the most crucial detail. Mr. Vance's messenger had inquired about his health before the proposal. They knew. Mr. Vance promised the surgery, Maya. The best doctors in the city. He promised the operation would be arranged the day the papers are signed, her father whispered. "He's not just buying us security, he's buying me a few more years." The truth was a punch to the gut. This wasn't about her comfort, it was about her father's survival. The emotional whiplash was extreme. Her small romantic dreams of love were instantly shattered, replaced by the crushing reality of a life-or-death choice. She looked at her father, fragile and terrified. Her choice was no choice at all. She would marry Mr. Vance. Her sacrifice was no longer a negotiation of happiness, but a direct, necessary transaction for a life. The duty hardened her resolve. She would give up her heart, her youth, everything, if it meant her father would live. The papers, though signed out of grim necessity, felt like the most loving act she could possibly perform. The wedding was quiet and formal. A business transaction disguised as a ceremony. Held in a city office, it was only attended by her family and Mr. Vance's lawyer. Maya wore a simple, rented white dress that felt heavy, not light. She was exchanging her single life for her father's continued existence. Mr. Vance was exactly as described, but the reality was more striking than the description. He was, in his late 60s, impeccably dressed, but visibly crippled. He used a thick, sturdy wooden cane and moved with great difficulty, leaning heavily on his assistant when he walked. His hands trembled when he signed the documents. His face was deeply wrinkled, but his brown eyes, though aged, were surprisingly gentle and kind. He spoke to her with utmost respect, never once touching her or demanding her affection. "Maya," he said, his voice low and firm, "I understand this is a grave sacrifice for you. I respect your loyalty to your family above all things. My promise is absolute. Your father is booked for surgery tomorrow morning. You will never want for anything again. That is the contract between us." He treated her like a valuable commodity he intended to protect, not a young wife he intended to claim. This respectful distance eased a deep, unspoken fear in Maya's heart. The documents were signed, the marriage was sealed. The lawyer handed her father a folder detailing the payment guarantee for the surgery and the trust fund. The relief on her father's face was total, and that was Maya's only reward. Saying goodbye to her family was agonizing. She hugged her frail mother and her now relieved father. Leo, tears in his eyes, whispered, "I will never forget this, Maya." She entered the massive black sedan, leaving the dusty village behind. As the car sped toward the opulent life of the city, Maya looked back at her family, small but safe on the roadside. She had made the trade. She had saved them. The cost was the rest of her life, bound to an old, crippled man she barely knew. She settled into the painful quiet of her new reality. The mansion was huge and silent, cold with expensive furniture and polished stone. Maya felt utterly lost, a small dusty bird in a glittering empty cage. A polite housekeeper showed her to her room, a large, airy suite with a private bathroom and a view of the city lights. Mr. Vance showed her around, moving slowly with his cane. "Your rooms are here, Maya. Mine are at the end of the hall. You will have your privacy. There are no expectations of you, save your presence and your comfort." Maya was flooded with relief. She had expected to be forced into a shared room, to endure the intimacy of a man who was almost 60 years older than her. Instead, he had given her distance and respect. They shared a quiet dinner at a massive table. Mr. Vance spoke only of her father's hospital arrangements, assuring her the surgery was going ahead perfectly. He was kind, gentle, and formal. It was a business arrangement of companionship, nothing more. Later, as she sat alone in her luxurious room, wearing a silk nightgown that felt like a costume, there was a light tap at the door. Mr. Vance stood there, leaning slightly on his cane. He looked fragile. "Just wanted to check on you, my dear," he said, his voice slow and soft. "This is a great, terrifying change. Please rest. There is no urgency here. You are safe." He gave a small, formal bow of his head and turned, slowly making his way down the long hall toward his own suite. Maya leaned against her closed door, finally breathing easy. He was a gentleman. He was respectful. She hadn't been sold into cruelty. She had been sold into a quiet, lonely kind of peace. Her sacrifice had bought her family life and safety. Maybe, she thought, this would be a life she could endure. The silence of the huge room was better than the noise of debt and desperation. Maya couldn't sleep. The bed was too soft, the silence too absolute. She kept listening, worried, about the old man down the hall. His fragility was a constant, low-level worry. After a couple of hours, she heard it, the slow, measured tap of his cane moving down the corridor. Then the click of his door, and shortly after, the clear, rushing sound of a shower starting up in his suite. She relaxed slightly, knowing he was fine, but as time stretched on, the water kept running. An hour passed. She sat up in bed, frowning. 90 minutes. That was far too long. He was an old man and a crippled one. He could have fallen. Her old anxiety about her father now transferred to her husband. She didn't love him, but she respected him, and she was bound to him. She couldn't ignore the silence that accompanied the running water. She got out of bed, her heart thumping, and crept down the hallway in her robe. She stopped outside his door. The light was off, but the sound of the shower was a loud, constant roar from inside the attached bathroom. She knocked lightly. "Mr. Vance, are you all right? The water has been running for a long time." No response, only the relentless rush of the water. She knocked harder, fear seizing her throat. "Mr. Vance, I'm coming in." She tried the handle. It was unlocked. She pushed the door open, the room dark except for the faint light spilling from the hallway. "Mr. Vance." As she reached the closed bathroom door, the water suddenly and violently stopped. The silence that followed was shocking. Then the frosted glass door of the bathroom slowly swung open. Maya froze, her eyes widening in horror. The figure that emerged was not the elderly man. There was no cane, no frailness. A young man, tall and powerfully built, stood there. He was completely handsome, with dark, intense eyes and wet, slicked-back dark hair. He was only wrapped in a white towel. His body was young, strong, and entirely unfamiliar. Maya let out a muffled, raw gasp, stumbling backward. She was sure he was an intruder. Terror seized Maya, locking her to the spot. Her mind scrambled for an explanation. A thief, a murderer, something terrible. "Who are you?" She choked out, fighting the urge to scream. "Where is Mr. Vance? What have you done to my husband?" The young man stepped fully into the light of the room. He was utterly calm, a stark, unsettling contrast to her panic. "Maya," he said, his voice deep and warm. His voice. It was the same familiar, low and comforting baritone she had heard at the wedding and at dinner. It was impossible. She rejected the sound, the truth it implied. "No, no, stop," she whispered, backing away until she hit the cold wall. "My husband is old. He is crippled. You are not him. You are a liar. Where is he?" She looked frantically around the empty suite. "Is he hurt? Did you hide him?" He sighed, the sound heavy with regret. "There is no one else, Maya. I am Mr. Vance, and I am 28 years old." The explanation was so bizarre, so unbelievable, that it stopped her terror cold. "A disguise?" "That is insane," she said, her voice dropping to a low, trembling accusation. "That is not possible. Why would you do that?" He stood there, letting her accusation hang in the air. "The man you saw tonight, the cane, the wrinkles, the grey hair, it was all makeup and prosthetics. The movements, the stoop, the tremor all acted. It was an elaborate illusion." "But why?" she repeated, her voice rising. "Why go through that? To torment me? To make me think I was giving up my life for a dying man?" "To know what was in your heart," he admitted, his dark eyes fixed on hers. "To know that you were marrying a poor bargain for the sake of your family's safety. I needed to know if your compassion was genuine, or if you were simply marrying the money." He knew. He had seen her sacrifice, her acceptance of the difficult trade-off, and he had let her walk through the pain of it. The betrayal was immense, a towering wave of shock and anger. But under the anger, a terrible, dizzying relief started to bloom. Her duty was gone. The crippled old man was gone. In his place stood a young, handsome man who had engineered the entire ordeal. The young man, whose real name was Elias Vance, walked over to a chair and sat, pulling the towel tighter around him. He spoke slowly, laying out the dizzying truth. "This started 5 years ago, not 5 days ago," Elias began. "It started with my grandfather, the original Mr. Vance, the man who truly built this wealth." He explained that his grandfather, before his final illness, used to wander the city in disguise, testing the character of people. He sought honest, uncalculated kindness. "One day he collapsed, not in the city but near your old village," Elias said. "He looked like a poor, sick man who had lost his way. He was genuinely injured and utterly alone." Maya listened, her anger muted by the emerging story. "Everyone ignored him. People stepped around him. But you didn't." He went on to describe the day. Her mother was sick, and Maya was just 16, managing the small vegetable stall alone. The old, crippled man, Elias's grandfather, had stumbled to her stall looking wretched and feverish. "You gave him water. You gave him the last piece of bread your mother had packed for you, and you sat him down in the shade. You didn't ask for money or credit. You just saw a person in pain," Elias said, his voice reverent. Maya remembered it now, a small, forgotten act of simple humanity. She had spent a few of her own meager coins to put him in a cheap taxi back to the nearby town, telling him to rest. "My grandfather never forgot that. He said you were the only person in years who treated him like a human being, not a beggar or a business opportunity." When the older Mr. Vance was dying, he made his grandson Elias promise one thing. He had to marry the girl. He had watched Maya grow up, tracked her scholarship success, and seen the social stigma she and Leo faced. He told me to marry the girl who showed kindness when she had nothing, Elias concluded. But I couldn't just walk in here as a young, rich man. I had to know if you still valued compassion over comfort. I had to know if you were truly the girl who helped him. So you became the crippled old man, Maya finished, her voice flat with comprehension. You put on the mask to force my choice. You wanted to see if I would accept a life of duty over a life of love. Yes, he whispered. The test was painful, Maya, but it proved everything. You were willing to sacrifice your joy for your father's life. You married me for honor, not for my face or my bank account. You passed. The truth was an earthquake. The feeling of betrayal was huge, but the flood of overwhelming relief that followed, the realization that the old life was gone and the young, handsome man was real, was even bigger. The anger was fading, replaced by a dizzying, hopeful disbelief. Maya's legs felt weak. She walked over to the thick rug and knelt on it, running her fingers over the smooth, expensive fibers. The air felt lighter. The huge mansion no longer felt like a prison. I grieved, she said, her voice shaking. I accepted the end of my life as a sacrifice. I mourned the loss of my youth and my chance at a real partnership. And you watched me do that. Elias, her husband, the real Elias, stood and walked toward her. I watched, and it was the hardest thing I have ever done. But I had to be sure. I had to know you weren't like the rest of the world that only values surface and gain. And if I had been, Maya challenged, looking up at him, her eyes still wet with shock. If I had scorned the old crippled man or treated him like a burden once the marriage was settled, what then? Then I would have paid for your father's surgery, given your family the promised security, and filed for a quiet divorce a month later. Elias admitted. I would have kept my grandfather's debt of gratitude, but I would not have kept the wife. The immense crushing weight of duty that had rested on her shoulders for the last week suddenly lifted and vanished. Her sacrifice was not required. Her character had been. The sorrow she had felt, the life she had signed away, was a phantom. She looked at Elias's face, earnest and full of remorse, and saw not the deception, but the depth of his commitment. He had gone to such ridiculous lengths to find true sincerity. He was not just rich. He was a man who valued soul over appearance. You took my choice, she said, her voice quieter now, the anger dissolving into relief. But you gave me back my life. She stood up, needing proof, needing to anchor the reality of the young man in her mind. I need to see it. I need to see the old man again. It's too much to process. Elias nodded immediately. You will. You deserve it. I need you to know that the man you married and the man standing here are the same heart. He walked over to a hidden panel and revealed a small professional makeup station. He knew what she needed. The next step was to provide the undeniable visual proof. Elias used his phone to call a discreet, specialized team. They arrived quickly, two quiet professionals carrying sleek aluminum cases. They were the artists who had created the illusion of Mr. Vance. Maya watched, silent and wide-eyed, as Elias sat down. The process of reapplication was fascinating and chilling. The artists worked quickly, applying thin silicone prosthetics to sharpen his cheekbones and create the droop of age around his eyes and jaw. They blended specialized makeup to add deep, realistic wrinkles and a sallow tone to his skin. Then came the visual markers of the crippled old man, the silver wig, the contact lenses that subtly dulled the dark sparkle of his eyes, and a small, complex harness that forced a permanent, painful stoop in his shoulders and restricted his movement. It took less than an hour. When the artists finished, Elias slowly stood up, leaning heavily on the real wooden cane one of the artists handed him. He was the man Maya had married. The transformation was complete and terrifyingly real. He looked exactly like the frail, kind man who had signed the papers, the man she was prepared to endure life with. The voice that came from his mouth was rich, but now seemed to carry the rasp of age. "Do you believe me now, my wife?" he asked. Tears sprang to Maya's eyes. It was absolute proof. The whole terrifying experience had been an elaborate costume. Her fears, her sacrifice, her duty, all had been carefully engineered to test her intrinsic goodness. She watched as the harness was quickly removed, freeing his shoulders. The wig and prosthetics came off, revealing the handsome young face beneath. The dual image, the two identities, collapsed into one single powerful truth. Elias was a man who went to extreme lengths to protect his heart and honor his family's debt. He was a man who valued truth above all else. The illusion was stripped away. The true reward was now clear. Maya walked toward Elias, no longer tentative, but with a fierce certainty that had been missing from her life. The lingering shock of the deception had been replaced by a powerful sense of validation. She had endured the test, and she had won. She reached out and touched his cheek, tracing the line where the fake wrinkles had been. "I don't care about the money," she whispered, her voice husky. "I care that you saw my father's need. I care that you saw me character, that you saw me when everyone else only saw the poverty around me." Elias took her hands, his grip warm and strong. "I saw the girl who gave the last of her food to a sick stranger. That is the only Maya I wanted to marry." "I love you," she confessed, the words pouring out, raw and unplanned. "I love the honesty you finally showed me. I love that you were willing to sacrifice your own dignity, the need to be loved for your looks or your money, just to find sincerity. Old or young, it makes no difference. You are my home now." They embraced, the connection immediate and deep. This was not the dutiful arrangement she had accepted. This was a true, profound partnership, built on a foundation of proven, uncalculated goodness. Her sacrifice had led her not to tragedy, but to an unexpected, incredible redemption. Their life together began instantly, built on the mutual respect forged in the fire of Elias's strange test. Maya's father, receiving the best care immediately, recovered fully from his surgery. Leo was brought to the city and began his long-dreamed-of apprenticeship, his life finally moving forward with stability. Maya embraced her role, but never forgot her roots. She used her position and influence to start a charitable foundation, focused on helping families from poor rural areas get access to education and non-discriminatory job training, ensuring that their character, not their bank account, was what mattered. Maya and Elias lived a life far beyond the simple happiness she had dreamed of. Their love story was a testament to patience, compassion, and the unwavering belief that inner beauty is the most powerful currency. She had finally achieved true stability, love, and comfort, all because of one small, spontaneous act of kindness years before. The most important lesson was clear. A true heart is the greatest wealth, and love, when it is real, always transcends the surface.